Hey everybody, it's Prajesh here.
And Tane here.
Welcome to our podcast, Baskets of Knowledge, Chats with a Difference. In our podcast, we invite guests from around the country and around the world to talk about how they got to where they're at the moment. It's about a journey, it's about an experience, it's about their life. Kia ora koutou, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of Baskets of Knowledge for 2024. Hopefully you enjoyed the first episode of 2024. And if you haven't, well, go back and listen to it. Tane, what have you been up to over the last few days since we had our last recording?
Yeah, I've been busy continuing pursuing my coaching now that we've started for nines for Otago Rugby League, which is quite cool. We had 12 girls on Sunday, which is pretty cool to see that girls are starting to commit and they're starting to get numbers so we can actually do things. And as far as I know, that's probably the most we've had at the training. So, outside of tournaments. So it's been pretty cool, pretty exciting to see that things are growing and things are progressing as we want them to. And then probably from more of a personal perspective, I've been working with my injury. I went into the physio Monday to try and see how I can continue to keep strengthening my knee. So I just got back into the gym today. So yeah, it's a pretty slow process. It's been 4 or 5 months now since I got that injury, but I guess it's been a huge learning curve, not only from a personal perspective in terms of how I manage an injury, but I guess also from a coaching perspective in terms of, how can we support players going through injury to keep them involved, keep them engaged, but not put too much pressure on them to push through the injury for the sake of coming back early and risking something worse.
Yeah, I think that's really important because until you actually live through an experience, you have these expectations which are a bit unrealistic because you don't go and you don't know what's happening. So I know it's hard for you because I know you like being active. So this is some great skills you're going to take back when you start coaching again with the young people. And since we last spoke, one thing that really stuck out with me, which is actually really timely for this conversation, is yesterday I was at a presentation. That was really beautiful. It was about refugee students and education, access to education by refugee students, which really blew my mind. We live in a country where we take education for granted, and the speaker spoke about how refugees, students who come to New Zealand or actually anywhere in the world, they have this hope and they have this beautiful, ambition, but there are so many barriers out there for them, from language barriers to expectation barriers to the barriers that we have about us versus them. And I just brought it out, and I posted a quote on my LinkedIn yesterday because Vivian spoke about it, and it got me thinking about, we all have human rights, shelter, blah 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 blah, which is important. But she said that education is the only true enabling human right, and that got me thinking because without education, all the other stuff just disappears pretty quickly. So it's really quite powerful that Tana, you've done your honors, which that's going to open up doors for you in education. And I work in a space where I think education, no matter what it is, whether it's tertiary, whether it's a university, a polytech, a trade, whatever it is, it's really a something that we need to cherish and also not take for granted. And for those populations where they struggle to get into, we have to try and enable it somehow. And I'm sure our guest today is going to talk about that as well, because I know they're passionate about education. So it actually worked out really quite well. It wasn't planned, it just worked out really, really quite well. And talking about our guests, I'd love to, for our listeners out there, we scour the country, we scour the world to do people that we think interesting. Everyone is interesting, everyone is amazing, everyone's got a story. But as you always say, we don't have money to have everyone on. So we can only have one guest at a time. And today I'm really privileged and really honored to have someone that I've been following on LinkedIn for a very long time. Their posts are engaging. The work that they do is really beautiful because they're out there working with young people, working in the education sector. But also, I had a chat with our guest a few months ago, and it was a really fun chat. So I'm really honored and privileged to have Shailan on our podcast. Welcome to our podcast, Shailan.
Thank you. Thank you both. Great to be here. And really looking forward to the conversation with you both.
Yeah, fantastic, Shailan. I'm just going to segue straight into the education thing. Education is really something that drives you. You've got a really awesome history of things you've done, but right now you're working in education. And given what I said about the power of education, how do you see that in your current role, or in just as Shailan as a person?
So, look, what I've been doing for the last coming up to 9 years in April as the education manager at MYOB, working with education institutions across Australia, New Zealand, and tens of thousands of students in that time, I sort of fell into it. So the opportunities that have come from it, I didn't know were there until actually doing it.
Yeah.
And so I always say, and it's even funnier now, the last time I spoke to a student before this role was when I was a student.
Oh, wow.
The last time I spoke to an educator before this role was when I was a student. So there's a massive gap between finishing university to then, or being on the other side of the world, working in this space. And what I've been able to sum it up, what I sort of love about this space is education is full of promise, ambition, and opportunity. And what you were referring to in your introduction, anyone, any background, any circumstances, the ability to keep learning, to give you those opportunities, to fulfill a promise, to achieve your ambitions, are there, not just sort of the traditional means, but I'm sure we're all going to learn something from each other, in the next hour or however long we're together. And so that, you hear lifelong learning a lot now as well. It's always been around. I thought maybe we're just better at identifying that learning can come from anywhere, not just a classroom or a lecture theatre.
And I like that because, as you said, we've always had education in the past. You've had oral stories where stories are passed on from an elder to a younger person, but it's an education about, hey, this is where you've got to go to get water, or this is the kind of fruits you've got to eat. And we've just become self-formalized with, hey, we've got to go to school, get a certain qualification, and that defines education. But actually, as you said, every conversation can be an educated conversation depending on what you take from it.
And I think things are changing so much or so fast. Change is not new, but how quickly that the knowledge gap between people is, I believe, shortening, because everyone was talking about AI last year, but everyone's starting from the same spot, whether you are at high school, tertiary, early in your career, or someone retiring. Given it was so new, generative AI, the impact it had, the adoption rates, meant that no one who had been working for 20 years, even in a tech company, would necessarily be way better off than someone who is just studying tech at a high school. So therefore, I think that is now a major difference, whereas tenure experience meant more knowledge.
Yeah, totally.
Things weren't changing as fast, and so it was more relevant for longer.
Yeah.
Whereas what you learn last year, yesterday, could go within an instance because the next thing's arrived.
And that's so true. We've seen that with all the technologies that have popped up, and what that is meant for, for everybody. I always use this example. Like 2 years ago, there was no such thing as ChatGPT. It did not exist in the mainstream. But now it's, as you said, every few months there's a different iteration or a different version of, there's ChatGPT, there's Bard, there's all these crazy tools out there. And it just depends on how and where we are prepared to acknowledge and use that information. But Shailan, we've just jumped into education, but let's talk about your background. Let's just talk about your background. Tell our guests, our listeners, who you are, what you do at the moment, and yeah, that's a good start, I guess.
Yeah. So Shailan Patel. Currently live in the South Island, Christchurch. Born and bred in the UK, and went to university at the University of Bristol. Studied economics and economic history, and then my first few roles in London were within sales type of environments. So started off in recruitment, financial services. Got made redundant in 2008. No surprise with the global financial crisis. And then took a bit of time off For whatever reason, I felt I needed a career break, even though I'd only had one job after university, albeit for a few years. Then I went from that sort of consultative selling to really boiler room selling at an event sales company before I had the opportunity to move to New Zealand. So I always wanted to work abroad, and I'm sure we may unpack that further. And started working for Yellow Pages New Zealand, who I actually met in London, and got the job with them before I came over. Worked for a couple of other big media companies, and then in 2015, as I said earlier, fell into this role with MYOB. We're an accounting software and business management platform, and joined to manage the education space in New Zealand. And since 2020, have been working across Australia and New Zealand. That's obviously how I've been able to connect even yourselves through the relationships that I have within the education space, not just universities, polytechnics, TAFEs in Australia, high schools, students, sort of all ages, and really focusing in on that student engagement, development journey, transition into graduate roles, early talent roles, which has led me now. I serve on the board for the New Zealand Association of Graduate Employers. So yeah, that's where interest, passion lies within education, but then what it can lead to from a career perspective, and how can we help shorten that gap. There was a bit of research by the Foundation for Young Australians a few years ago, which sort of has helped me focus on what my purpose or where I see the impact that I can have. And they followed, I think it was 15,000 students from the age of 15 to 25. And one of the key stats that came out of the report that stuck with me was that it was taking anywhere between 2.5 to 5 years for young people to transition from education to meaningful employment, compared to 1 year in 90 days.
Oh, wow.
So I think things are more difficult now, but there are more opportunities. So how can we help close some of that gap? And, things like gap year and OE, etc., can also contribute to why it is, maybe getting to 3, 4, 5 years. But even if I look at my own journey, I graduated in July 2004, didn't start work till January 2005. And so I had a 6-month period where I didn't know what I want to do, looking for a few jobs, but not really. And maybe I was lucky in a position where I didn't have to go and get a job straight away, but there was a 6-month gap.
Yeah.
And so through the work that I'm doing now is how can we help sort of close that gap, help students identify some of those opportunities, and so that they transition to meaningful employment. It may not be what they're studying. It may not necessarily be something that they ever thought they were interested in. But that's also with the world of work changing, jobs that will be available tomorrow that haven't been thought of yet. And so, yeah, that's, I suppose, a bit of a long summary of where I'm at now and that journey.
But it's really quite timely because, I guess Tane is in that exact position right now, having finished his honors and looking for a role. But also, a lot of young people that we work with, or the two of us work with, they go to university or tertiary or whatever it is, and they study for a particular role. And when they finish up, they go, actually, I don't actually want to work in this space here, or I don't know why I did this thing here. And, I'm increasingly seeing that, which is quite interesting because, like you said, a few years ago, you'd go to university, I want to be an accountant, I want to be whatever, and you'd have a plan. But as you said before, it's difficult, but also the options. There's so many options out there that, you have the paradox of choice. Like, oh, what if I do this and I'll miss out on that there, which is with everything, if you think about anything in the world now, there's so much choice that if you think you're doing one thing, you get distracted by other thing. Oh, what am I doing here? And Tana, I guess you're a living, breathing person right now in this space here. How do you feel about that,
Yeah, it's quite an interesting perspective actually, and I think you both raised valid points. I think in terms of understanding where you want to go. I think sometimes you get so stuck in your education journey that you almost forget that there's going to be a time where it finishes and you're going to have to go and find work. And I think it's a good point you raise around meaningful work, not just the sake of kind of bridging the gap, paying the bills. And I guess that's been my challenge at the moment is I am trying to get into meaningful work. And so sometimes you have to sacrifice, a couple of months, 6 months, a year, whatever it might be, so that in the long term, I'm actually in a position that I want to be in, not a job that I'm doing just to go week in, week out. And from your point, Prajesh, it is quite timely, and it is quite interesting that, that there are so many more options now. When I first got into sport and exercise, and I guess it is the generic saying that, oh, you're going to go into PE teaching because that's what everybody thinks of it. But, these days there's so much more. There's sports coaching, there's game development, there's youth development, there's aging populations, there's the psychological background. There's so many different realms that you could pursue and get yourself into that I think it takes a lot more for us to consider, where it is that our true passion lies. It's not just a one size fits all anymore.
And it goes back to what you said, Shailan, before about this whole concept of experience. It's not going to change because everyone looks for experience, 5 years experience, whatever, 10 years experience. But as you said before, and you said, Tony, as well, those roles are all new. So how do you get experience in a role that's just come up? Really, it's a catch-22, really, isn't it?
It's it's moving away from that experience to actually the skills and what skills do you want to continue developing and using. So the one consistency with my roles is they're always have some element of sort of sales, relationship building, communication, customer facing roles. And so when the role came up with at MYOB, as I said, like I didn't have this background of working with all the New Zealand universities or knowing the student market. But essentially the role boiled down to building relationships with our education partners.
Yeah.
So you've got MYOB and you've got a partner. I'm the one in the middle. And thankfully, MYOB saw that I've got experience within that space that I can transfer across.
Yeah.
Because if they wanted, obviously we work with a lot of accountants, that's our software. So if they wanted someone within that space or an accountant, that's not me. If they wanted someone who'd worked in the software space, again, that's not me. If they wanted someone who's working in the education space, that's not me.
Yeah.
And yet 9 years later, here I am in this space, and obviously got the opportunity, took the opportunity, and then now have developed experience within that space.
Yes.
But when we boiled down to it, it was a couple of key skills. Okay. Can I articulate? Can I communicate? Work with whoever else was on the other end of the phone or the call, and build those relationships. And then through my previous roles, it was almost a drag and drop. And so I think now, and for a lot of young people, Tane, I would say to yourself, is what skills do you actually want to do day in, day out? So if someone came to me with a great job or great company and said, right, but you won't be speaking to anyone outside of the company, that's not for me.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to be customer facing. Some people don't want that. That's fine. I do I quite enjoy public speaking now. Again, some people would, if they advertised the role again and said, right, do guest lectures, workshops, presentations. If you don't want to do that, then don't apply for the role, sort of thing. So, but if you do want to do that, then almost seek out those roles where your skills you're going to be using day in, day out and want to continue developing. And even though I've done quite a few guest lectures now, I can't complete public speaking.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll stumble, I'll stumble in the next few minutes on this podcast or the next presentation I have. But it's just practice makes perfect. And so therefore, I could say I like public speaking. I'm good at it, but it will vary, right? And almost it'll go up and down, but at least it's sort of trending in that upward line, which then comes back to that learning piece, and enjoying when you do stumble, and enjoying when it goes swimmingly as well.
Yeah, and it's I think that's crucial there, Shailan. I think that's for anyone that's listening, that when you're looking at the career, whether you're starting your career, the middle of your career, or you want to change your career, that it comes down to the skills, because you're going to be doing this for a long time, or however long you're going to be doing, and you've got to enjoy going to work. And I guess I'm at that stage in my life right now where I'm like, oh, what skills do I enjoy? I'm looking for career transition and change, but change for the sake of change without looking at the skills and the values is a risk for disaster. So so again, it's so hard for someone like Tane who's got to find meaningful work that matches their skills. But as you said, put yourself out there, which is the only way it goes. Talking about putting yourself out there, Shailan, Bristol, United Kingdom, New Zealand, as far away as possible. How did that transition happen for you? From sunshine to sunshine, I guess.
The always travelled, holidays, etc., and so I've probably seen more. By the time I left the UK, I've probably seen more of the world than I had the UK.
Yeah.
So the only time I've been to Scotland was actually on my first flight to New Zealand. We had to stop in Glasgow, and so actually, whether Glasgow Airport is considered international grounds or Scotland itself, so always looked at the sort of wider world as opposed to just the UK, and wanted to work abroad. And then I got the opportunity where some of my family members were working abroad, so I got to see them and visit their country that they were working in, which then really just heightened my appetite for it. When I was in recruitment, a lot of this side of the world, Australia, were looking for whatever reason, recruitment consultants to come over, and before the big crash, companies would come over and look for staff. So all of a sudden I was in a space which I knew I could easily transfer. Recruitment's the same, whether it's in England, Australia, or wherever it may be. The GFC sort of put a stop to that, and then it was a case of you need to be on the ground and things like that. By which time I was out of it. I was in event sales in the UK and sort of really enjoying that, closing a sale within 20 minutes as opposed to weeks, and enjoying that real sales environment, commission, work hard, play hard environment in London. And I said to myself in 2010, if I'm not out of the country by the end of the year, then in the interim, I'll just concentrate on my career within the UK and see what opportunities were at this company. And I went to a career fair mid-2010 that had a lot of companies, people from Middle East, the Americas, Australia, New Zealand, and Yellow Pages New Zealand were the only stand which had sales.
Oh, yeah.
And not surprising, because again,
100%.
There's no degree in sales. Like, you don't need a formal qualification as such. A lot of human skills involved, only human skills involved. And so I went to speak to them, and the dream was Australia. Like any Brit, we grew up watching Neighbours Home and Away, so we want to go there. And it sort of snowballed. I met with the team. I met with the sales director. They said, send us your CV. This was on a Saturday. Wednesday, I'm having the interview. And the interview really turned about, do you want to come to New Zealand?
Oh, wow.
If you do, here's a job.
Yep.
If you don't, then obviously we're not right for you, because a big shift. And so walked out knowing I've got a decision to make. Do I go to Auckland or do I stay? And the reality was I sort of had nothing to lose, because the worst thing that would happen is I lose a little bit of money and a little bit of time, and I'd have to come back home.
Yeah.
And I was in the fortunate position. I was, because of the GFC, I'd moved back home. And so obviously didn't need to worry about sort of a roof over my head. And then I left early November, landed on a Saturday instead of a Friday because of the delay. Then we had to go to Glasgow, and I started work on the Monday.
Oh, wow.
And obviously very different to those that may come to this side of the world looking for a job.
Yes.
Even if I lasted 2 weeks in New Zealand, I'd still get paid for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I came in November, swapping the cold for obviously sunshine. And at that time, Yellow New Zealand had a 3-week shutdown for Christmas. So I essentially had seven weeks work, and then I had a 3-week holiday. And we're not used to that in the UK because you work through.
Yeah, totally.
The Christmas, New Year period, you may have in between off, maybe more common now than it was then. And thankfully then, because I had that time off, a couple of cousins came out and we did a tour around New Zealand. So I had a 1-year work visa. Again, very sort of non-committal. If I go home after a year, I don't think I'd ever come back to New Zealand.
Yeah.
So I tried to do as much as I could, see as much of the country. Towards the end of that first year, there was the Rugby World Cup in New Zealand, 2011. So all of a sudden, I've come to this country, didn't know too much about, but worked for a few weeks, you got a few weeks off, get to see the country, and then everything's gearing up for the Rugby World Cup. And enjoying my time, selling advertising, meeting small businesses. And so, just realized that worst case, I go back to England.
Yeah.
Best case, well, here we are, 2024, still here, and not even in Auckland now. And married to a Kiwi, got the Kiwi kids. And it's great going back. I've been back a few times, and I like going back, but I don't think I'll be going back to live anytime soon. And then obviously instead of the 1-year visa, I did extend the visa, and then got my permanent residency, and now got the passport to boot. So, never would I have imagined that play out the way it did, but the opportunity was there, one that I couldn't say no to, and thankfully didn't. And obviously a great opportunity that was presented, which I took advantage of.
And it's really interesting because people that move over to this country have all these crazy stories. And like you and I moved over, the plan was to get to Australia at some point, and I'm still here. It's just the way it works out. But what I loved about your story there was the way you signposted it at 2010. This is what's going to happen. Either I'm out of the country or I'm going to be here. I think that's important to realize that, hey, you actually were super self-aware to go, hey, this is what I'm giving myself, these deadlines here, and then things just happen. We talk about manifestation and people talk about that kind of stuff there, but you have to start doing some stuff for things to actually start happening, as opposed to just thinking it through. Crazy. That is a great story. And I guess bringing back Tane into this conversation, Tane you haven't had the opportunity to travel, but now you're going to travel this year, and that opens up a whole lot of different opportunities for you as you start traveling.
Yeah, for sure. It's quite an exciting time. And I think even with that perspective, I was like, right, I've booked my flight tickets, so that I've committed, instead of saying, oh yeah, it's a good idea, I want to do it, because inevitably you find a reason not to do it, a reason not to go. And I guess that's what I've said with some of the young people too, like they're concerned about going away, going to a different place for education, or, playing a different sport or whatever it might be. And that's what I always say to them, look, the opportunity to come back is always there. Your parents are always going to be there to support you, so are friends, so although it can be scary and daunting, I think you just have to, as you say, reframe it to actually go, well, the worst that can happen is I end up exactly where I've been, and best case scenario is everything changes.
Yeah,
That's my advice. My advice to any young person now is, it doesn't have the same ring now because I don't think we're going to have any lockdowns, but sort of get out while you can. We don't want talent to leave these shores, obviously, but and borders aren't going to be closed again, I don't think. But if you have the opportunity, inclination at all, go see the world. As you said, tonight, you can come back. But whether it's like a month holiday or a few months off, your OE, work abroad and live abroad. The only thing I would change from my journey is I would have come early.
Yeah.
But like when I was at university, I didn't get the grades to do a semester abroad.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but if there was a way that every degree or tertiary course allowed some sort of exchange, and I could change that right now, I would do that. And almost make it mandatory. And so, whether that would go through or not, but I think I see a big difference in those students that have done an exchange.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden it's such a big step going from secondary to tertiary anyway. Because that's your choice, right? You're not told to go to school. You've made that choice. And you've made the choice to go to the lecture or the class. And then to make that step one further and go while you're studying and go into another country and have massive admiration for those that actually go to a country that is not their first language. So when I was looking, I was restricted to English speaking.
Yeah.
So really, America, Canada, Australia, where else where I know, guarantee I don't need to worry about the language. So yeah, if I could have gone earlier, I would have loved to. I was 27 when I moved, and obviously didn't have the grades, but anyone go, come back if you want, don't, but take that opportunity. And then now as we see those organizations that are cross country and can provide that, that's a real big sticking point, or a point why someone would potentially join, knowing it is easier to make that move.
I agree with that, because I've become such a big proponent of exchange over the last few years. I have, ever since post-COVID, I've just become a huge proponent that everyone should try and plan an exchange year in their program. Whether you're doing whatever you're doing, because it changes you dramatically as a human being in so many ways.
And we benefit from those that come from other countries here, right? And then
100%.
then they will see New Zealand and then think, okay, well actually I want to stay, or I may come back. So it's not always we'll just be losing. We will get people back.
Because that's the way exchange works. Right? Exchange works 10 for one, 10 for one, and then everybody wins. It's a win-win situation, which is really, really, really fantastic. I'm going to shift focus a little bit. Shailan, you work for MYOB and accounting software, as you said before. And when we talk to people these days, they're like, "Oh, the field of accounting is dead because software is taking over." And this is a myth. This is something that you must be hearing all the time. Why should I be an accountant? Why should I do finance? What are your thoughts as someone who lives and breathes in the space quite often, that, hey, actually I work in software? What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, look, I mean, and then we touched on AI, other robots coming, etc. So it's not just accounting, but I think, look, with technology and whatever can be automated, being automated by different technologies out there, there's no doubt that roles are changing. There's no role that isn't. To what extent? And when these conversations come up, accounting's usually on the chopping block. There was a bit of research by an Australian econometrics company, Alpha Beta, a few years ago now, that looked at a number of roles. But one of the reasons why we shared it was it looked at hundreds, if not thousands, of tasks that each role does, to work out what percentage of that role could be automated, could be done by a robot in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And for accounting or accountants, it was 29%. So what's that saying is that 2/3, close to 3/4 is human skills. And so technology like MYOB, accountants use, businesses use, but it's not to replace the accountant as such. It is to remove a lot of the mundane data entry tasks that they have, and free up then time for a business to utilize an accountant's knowledge, their business acumen, their advice, their mentoring to help the business, that small medium enterprise achieve whatever their goal may be. So there's a lot more to being an accountant now than what is traditionally thought of. So accountants and their clients will be speaking more than just tax time. So if they're having more communication, then the accountant's communication skills has got to be better. Their relationship building skills, they've got to build that trust, show that they're the expert within their field to help that particular business. So that's just for that industry, that role, but that probably relates to a lot more others. And so there will be all roles will be impacted, again, to what extent. But even if we going back to AI, I think the stats are for every one job that is lost due to AI or one task, I think it will generate another 1.5 jobs or tasks.
Yeah.
So on the balance, we'll actually be better off.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it's their enablers,
Yes.
or creators. I think someone I heard put it, AI it will create more than it will take away.
Yeah. And that's a good look at it, because there's all doom and gloom about AI, but actually, if you think about all the AI things that have happened, it's allowed us to free up time to do other things that we would never have been able to do, in the previous iteration of our lives. AI has done some pretty cool things to take over those mundane tasks. But I guess, humans live on emotions, and one of the biggest emotions is fear. And, we're all afraid, our jobs are going to go, our income's going to go. The fear of moving a country, the fear of what's happening next is so strong, which is how lots of people live their lives. And it takes an amazing amount of self-awareness to get that through, which is challenging, whether you are a CEO or whether you are a high school student. It's normal. It's a human emotion.
Oh, 100%. But, again, we've talked about change a bit, and with everything that's happened, COVID, obviously, and then a lot of tech companies last year making a lot of redundancies, a lot of restructures, a lot of changes. I think now or the way I look at it, and I've been through a redundancy where 2008, end of the world.
Yeah.
Like, I just thought, this is, like crazy. How can this happen? It actually probably turned out to be the best thing that happened, right? That takes time and hindsight. But now, I don't think anyone should expect it, but I don't think you can be surprised by it.
Yeah.
Like, you see it's happening, everywhere. Companies previously may restructure every year or two. They probably can't afford to do that because it's too late. The horse has bolted, the change has happened. So that will be happening, or it will be evolving months, weeks, potentially. So it shouldn't surprise you if those conversations comes up. As I said, don't expect it, and it will obviously be painful and not nice for anyone. And on the flip side, if you can leave a company, well, why can't they leave you, right? Like that. That's almost also the way I look at it. Like I said, no one should expect it. It sucks when it happens, and also the reality now that it's likely to happen to everyone at some point. And if they say young people coming through are going to have 18 different jobs, 5, 6, 7 different industries, law of averages means it can't always be their choice that they're going to move 18 times.
100%.
At least
100%.
one or two times, maybe it's the company that have said, right, we need to go in a different direction,
Yeah.
and this role is no longer required. So, yeah, for in that perspective, and again, going back to some of the early conversations, no one's going to do 18 degree
Yeah, that's right.
or 18 different tertiary. So then, you're developing different skills. Where can you transfer them? Because that will happen. And even though I've been at MYOB for 9 years and technically the same role, I think I've rewritten the position description probably 2 or 3 times already anyway. So I feel like I've been in a few different roles, but just under the same company in the same title.
Yes.
Although it continues to evolve. So, and that may be the case for a lot of people. But then anyone outside of that will just think, well, I'm only seeing one company, one job title, so it's they don't know because they're not in it, but you will know, and then what career progression looks like now doesn't always just mean up. And so, when I joined MYOB, I was thinking, okay, well, yeah, I'd love to, maybe be a sales manager, etc. No ambitions now to do anything like that, other than obviously build on the work that I've already done.
Yeah, and I think what's using an important word is evolution. As jobs will evolve, but so will you as a human, right? You will evolve and you will change. And I think we have to remember, we forget about that we change as our circumstances change. At the start, oh, I want to be a sales manager, but you actually, wait a minute. At that point in time, it is the perfect thing at that point in time. But now you evolve, you change, you find, like you said right at the start, your skills, your values change. You go, wait a minute, this is not what I do. And I think this is important for anybody listening, and myself included, that we change as human beings, and we have to be aware of those changes. And we can't, if we're the same place that we were 10 years ago in every aspect, then that's not good. Then that's not good at all. That's a little problem. However, on saying that, there's some people that want to be in that same space. This is what they're comfortable with, and there's nothing wrong with that. Cool. I go to work, I do my 9 to 5, I answer 25 emails. This is it, and that's all cool. I go and mow the lawn. That's fine. There's no right or wrong here. It's just. And I think this is where we have to remember, there's no such thing as right or wrong. It's just whatever a person is happy and content with, which is
I
great.
think it's just that there'll always be a need to adapt, though, regardless of what side. And so one of the Charles Darwin quote that I start 99% of my presentations, it's not the strongest or the most intelligent of species that survived. It's the one that's most adaptable to change. And so I think that always just sticks with me, that how do you adapt to it? And yeah, you could be the best, strongest, the most intelligent, going back to the what you talked about with the accountants. You could have been the best accountant for the last 20 years. If you're not adapting to what's happening, and for example, AI, the AI enabled accountant will replace the accountant not using AI.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah, it's always about reframing and thinking about it, and which is why these kind of conversations are important to have. That you go, wait a minute, there's other aspects out there that we don't see and speak about, which is important.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, in so many different ways. So you've traversed a couple of things. You also speak about being very active. I looked at we speak about your work, but being active and being physically active is something that's part of yours all. How is that, mentally? You've done a couple of marathons, which requires a whole different mindset. This is a half marathon. How did you go around that there? Because I speak to lots of people that go, I want to do this here, but then it gets too hard and they just stop. Yeah, if you want to talk about that, because you've been pretty. I don't know if you still do that anymore, but you have done those, and those marathon is a pretty big thing.
I've done 3 marathons, 11 half marathons in terms of actual organized races. Don't know, for some reason, again, probably because I was moved to this side of the world, and New Zealand known to be an outdoorsy, active country.
Yeah.
And also probably what drew me was running over the Auckland Harbour Bridge.
Yeah.
And so, in 2011 or 12, I think I was too late to sign up for the half to run over the bridge. So I just did the quarter and thought, right, let's get going. And then, right, next year I'll do the half. I get to, run over this bridge. And then all of a sudden, you get friends start running. You build a bit of a running community. And, let's go for the full all of a sudden. And I actually enjoy, shouldn't be a surprise, I enjoy talking, and managed to find a pace where I could run and talk.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's my level.
Yep.
I don't really like running with people that have headphones in, because then
What's the
who do I
point?
talk to?
Yeah.
And again, was pretty fortunate, had a couple of people that were willing to run at that pace and just have a chat. So half an hour, or a few hours. Yeah, there might be some quiet periods, but on the whole, can have a chat. And after I did my first marathon in Auckland, run over that bridge. Okay, well, what other bridge could I potentially run over? And then just across the ditch is Sydney. And then me and a friend thought, okay, well, right, let's book this up. We'll go over, we'll run it together. And at that time, that was their first marathon. So I knew that they would be probably a little bit slower and run with me. And actually, really, in 2015, it helped me get the job at MYOB.
Yeah.
I had it on my CV. I was training for the marathon. Interviewers saw that. We started talking about it. And a lot of those skills I was able to transfer to the business world. You've got a target. You've got to have your, this week I've got to do this number of Ks, as opposed to in a sales role, I've got to do this number of calls. It's a numbers game.
Yeah.
Resilience, determination, etc., all came through. And so did Sydney, had a goal of beating the time. Thankfully, I got to do. And then I did 2017, I did the marathon again in Auckland. I was getting married in 2018, so it's a bit of a let's get fit for the wedding sort of thing. And then the last half I did was the Queenstown half marathon in 2022. So I said I came out of retirement for that and then went straight back into retirement. But again, for whatever reason, I think it is because of the country that I'm in, was just a lot more active. I did a little bit of running in the UK, but not any sort of half marathons or any organised races. And even I started playing football in Auckland, where I never played 11-a-side football apart from at university. So I had a big gap where I wasn't playing a lot of 5-a-side, 7-a-side, but not proper winter. And then again, we're building my network in New Zealand and coming over on my own. Then you've got to think, how can you build, make friends? And one friend joined the team in Western Springs, another friend joined the team. I went down to watch. They were like, do you want to join? And again, very lucky to join a team that had played together for many years, like even from school to some of them played together while they were overseas.
Oh, wow.
And by the time I did 9 seasons with them, in that time, I think they celebrated 30 years together as a team. And I'm sure Tane can, especially relate to this. And so it was social football, but also there was an element of, if you want to be part of the team, be part of the team. If you don't come to training, you can't start the next game.
Yeah.
Right? And so, again, a lot of teamwork skills, that sort of collaboration skills. I was the socials chair, organising.
Surprise, eh?
Well, I think I liked it with we had fine, so that helped build up for the end of season 2, and being the fines master was good fun. So again, you miss training, it's $1 here. You miss that, it's $1 there. It's funny how quickly it can rack up, and then become almost a game to see who we could find the most. And so, yeah, great community within the bigger community, within that team sport, and then obviously the running individual, but prefer to do it with people. And now I tell myself I'm taking a break before the kids sports take off, and then all my efforts and will go on to see if they can go beyond just the fun amateur stuff to the dream that I have for them to take me to the Premier League. But that's probably another conversation. I saw, actually, it was Sinner who won the tennis open.
Tennis, yeah.
Yeah, and he thanked his parents for not putting pressure on
Yep,
on
he
them,
did.
and it reminded me that well, maybe I might have to change tact as to what sort of pressure I put on my kids.
That was just subliminal, right? Just subliminal in the background.
Yeah.
Nothing.
That's
Yeah.
it. Just gently steering them to
Exactly, yeah.
to the sport that I want them to play.
Yeah, that's so that's so funny, but it's so true. What I love about that, Sheldon, is how you spoke about sport as a way of networking, and humans are networkers in so many different ways. And I don't know if you've ever seen the last lecture by Randy Pausch. It's a beautiful, beautiful lecture. It was on YouTube probably 10 years ago, and he speaks about how you take your children or your young people to play a sport, and he says it's not about the sport. It's got into the sport. It's he called it a head fake. It's about interacting with other people, and it always comes back to me when we think about myself and other people, that sometimes you've got to do things that you don't want to do, not because of the actual thing, but the other skills that you're going to be getting. And you spoke about how you're training for a marathon, crossed over to actually your sales, and you just have no idea. You just have no idea what those skill sets are going to be. And no matter what we do in our life, movement is important, and it's pretty crazy how that comes across. And Tana, you said at the start that you've been struggling, you had this injury, but yet I still see you running 7Ks and all these crazy things here. That's just to keep. Let's talk about that there for a second.
Yeah, I think part of it is just the determination to get back to where I want to be. And I think, there's other aspects now. For me, it's not so much about being fit for the sake of getting into my own sport, but it's from a coaching perspective as well. I love to be a part of training, run with the drills and stuff like that, and run around with the girls. So, it's definitely changed perspective. And just back to your point about the team environment, I think that's always underestimated in a team environment, in a team sport. I think, and that's something I try to keep in the back of my mind when I'm coaching these girls, is it's not necessarily about the sport. The skills can come. You're going to have people who can, play at a New Zealand level. You're going to have girls who have never played before. But the reality is, if we can create a strong team environment, the rest will come, not necessarily straight away, but over time it will come, because they'll develop other skills. They'll communicate with each other. They'll hang out with each other outside of the sporting context. And all those little nuances is what really matters, in a competitive environment when you are trying to win games. So, I think it's a really cool perspective to have. And I still, as I say, I think it's still very much undermined from many people, not just the players, but parents and other factors that, it's very under considered, but something that I think is most valuable in a sporting context.
Yeah,
I think same when it comes to, like interviews or networking. Yes. Most young people think, well, I've got to highlight my academic and any careers that are all roles, jobs that I like. And if a question is about teamwork, or give an example of team, then it's okay to talk about the sport that you have played. Whether it's no one, I think, on the other end is expecting you to talk about you've played for a professional team or New Zealand, whatever environment you've played within. And so I think that's where sometimes it's missed, those experiences that they have, and just not being able to identify those skills within them and how they can just transfer to what you're actually going for. And so when I was running, I wasn't going for a job where I'll be running every day. That's not, when I'm training for the marathon, I'm speaking to the manager. They weren't, I didn't start the next day and they were like, oh, here's a treadmill, off you go.
Yeah.
And I think that just highlighting there, Helen, you mentioned about the teamwork, the coaching. And so if a question comes up about leadership, then you're able to talk about those experiences. It doesn't have to be about your time at university or your time at, a Saturday job. And I think that's where all experiences can be relevant.
Yeah. It's just the way you frame it, right? And unfortunately, we live in a world where the framing is around those formal roles. Those formal roles. And when I go into schools and I speak to young people, I'm like, hey, it doesn't matter if you're not a prefect or blah 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 blah. You volunteer. You help your grandmother, and you help your grandmother every weekend. This is really important. This is really important stuff. So don't sell yourself short. And unfortunately, we have been programmed in a world where we have to find those labels and those titles, which
of course.
we all do that there. I mean, I do that as well. When I look at my CV, I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't put that in, but it's just the programming thing. So yeah, I'll look at that again, Shailan, when I do my CV. Shailan, we've been talking for about an hour, which is just flown by really, really fast. Tanya, any questions before I ask Shailan our last few questions?
I think I've learned a lot, and it's been cool just to see where this conversation has gone.
Yeah, Shailan, our podcast is called Bastards of Knowledge, and you have shared so much wisdom in the last hour, but we invite each one of our guests to put some piece of knowledge into our basket, both for myself and for Tanya, for our listeners. So is there any piece of knowledge you'd like to put into our basket? You can go, you can have two pieces of knowledge, because I'm sure you have tons. Or you can have one. It's up to you.
Yeah. I think, again, one that I always do share is, if you don't shout about yourself, no one else.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got to be the champion. And maybe because I'm not born in New Zealand and where I've come from the UK, and in sort of my personality, a little bit easier to do so. But I do believe that you've got to be your advocate, and really push, not push, but showcase what you have to offer. And I've never met, obviously a lot of the conversation we've had about young people, I've never met a student that has nothing to offer. They just don't exist.
Yeah.
But I have met a lot of students that, for whatever reason, are very good at underselling them.
I'll give you a great example. Yesterday, I had a
Mm.
conversation with a young man, and I was like, "Hey, what did you do over summer?" He's like, "Oh yeah, nothing." I was like, "Oh, I just played a bit of cricket. That's all I did." Then his dad goes, "No, you didn't just play for. You just played some. You played for New Zealand." And I was like, "Oh yeah." I was like, "Wow, this is such a big thing," So I really love that. If you don't shout for yourself, no one's going to shout for you.
And I think the second thing, it sort of relates to this in terms of your brand, your personal brand. It's not a popularity contest. It's about sort of personal, professional development, your reputation. And so working on your brand, and if we think about the online space, things like LinkedIn, it's not like the number of followers, for example. But it's being able to understand who you are, the experiences that you've had, the skills that you're developing. So again, putting a skill on your LinkedIn or your CV, you don't have to be an expert at it. You don't have to have completed it. It could be one that you're developing. So when recruiters are looking for you, you come up. But you've got to put it there if that's what you're developing.
Yeah.
So in terms of building your brand, thinking about that development piece, as opposed to, I need X amount of people in my network, or X amount of followers, or likes, or comments, or whatever, or reach. You go to an event, it has to be 100 people there. As long as there's that one person, then it will lead to potentially a sale or an opportunity or a job. So they would be my two sort of nuggets, which I think do link in with the conversation that we've had.
Yeah, no, they totally do, because if you don't show up for yourself, you can't build your brand. But I like how you said, when you're building your brand, put down the skills that you're developing as well, because we always wait, or I haven't done that, or haven't got this qualification, or haven't done that, but doesn't mean that you're working through it. So yeah, really two fantastic.
I mentioned about the public speaking.
Yes.
If I could not then add it to my CV if that was the thing, because like I've never done a qualification on it. Like, I may think I'm a 7 or an 8, where someone else may think, actually, I heard him speak and he was a 5. Someone else may have heard me speak another time and I think I was a 10. So then, as I said, you can't complete it. It's always something that will get, you keep developing. And that's why I add it to my CV on my LinkedIn.
Beautiful. That is really beautiful. And I guess your whole story is about all that there. You went to the Yellow Pages person to say, hey, Sal, this is who I am. Your LinkedIn profile, as I said, this is how I found you. And, you put some really cool stuff out there. And it's not about the number. It's about that one person that you connect with. And, that's just real life.
Oh, so that's how we connected, obviously, as well.
That's right, yeah.
And a few messages, and here we are. So
exactly.
You don't know where it's going to lead to.
That's right, exactly. No, beautiful. Shailan, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for this conversation. As I said at the start, we have no idea where it goes. It just goes, and it's gone to some really, really cool parts. Thank you for sharing your life story. There's so much in there about where you've come from, what you're doing, the passion that you have, the passion that you're growing. It's really, really beautiful. And I guess we've both learned a lot. So thank you so much for your time and your space today. To our listeners out there, hopefully you have enjoyed this. If you haven't enjoyed it, go back and listen, because I'm pretty sure you've missed out. And if you want to connect with Shailan, I recommend him. I mean, I keep saying this because I find value in your posts, and I don't just say things when I don't mean it. So jump onto LinkedIn, find him there. He's really beautiful, and have a listen to this podcast. And as always, we appreciate you. We think you're fantastic. Please like, share, comment on this post here, and share with your whānau, your friends. But the most important thing for us is to make sure that over the next few weeks, make sure you find something to put into your basket of knowledge. Till next time, ka kite. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Baskets of Knowledge.
Yeah, we hope that you found something useful to put into your basket of knowledge. And as we said before, remember to put something little into your baskets of knowledge every week. And as always, feel free to like, comment, and share this podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.